In this lesson, we're going to talk about pivot tables. So these have been added fairly recently into Excel, and they're just a very useful way to summarize large amounts of data. So the key thing that we're going to talk about is before you can even get started, the data's got to be in the right form. And so I'll give you some examples that I think will help you do that. And then once you get the data prepared, then it's really easy to build a pivot table, and it's easy then to manipulate it and get various summaries of the data, different views, that kind of thing. So I'll just kind of walk you through that with some slides first, and then I'll do a demo at the end. So there's this website called excelpivots.com, and they had a nice summary of the principles you should consider as you prepare your data. So in general, it's probably easier if the data starts in cell A1, the upper left corner. Not necessary, but probably simpler. It is important that every column has a field name, at the header, and you'll use that to build the tables later. So you got to have headers everywhere. Those should be unique, but it'll Excel will deal with it if they're not. You want to avoid blank cells, especially in column A, but I just have never done one with a blank cell everywhere. So it's easier if you just avoid them altogether. And then you don't want any subtotals or anything within your data. The pivot table will create all kinds of subtotals for you and totals, and so you don't want those in the raw data. So raw data is just that. It's the data, and then you let the pivot table do the rest of the work. So if you've already got those in there, you probably have to delete them or at least make sure they're not included. So to demonstrate this, I grabbed some precipitation data for different American cities. So this is average monthly rainfall in 7 cities in the U.S. by month, and these are in inches, I think. There is some interesting discrepancies there, things I didn't expect if you want to poke around in the data, but nonetheless, we'll just use this as an example. And I will tell you that this is kind of how you'd see the data presented in a report or something like that, but it's not how you want the data for a pivot table. You really want, in this case, one precipitation value per row. So we want to convert the month and city into column headers and then present the data that way. It takes a little effort to do this. It's kind of a pain. In fact, in general, I think the recommendation would be whoever produced this data, you want to go back to them and say, in the future, don't produce it this way. Give it to me in this other form, which I'll show you in a minute. So in general, it's easiest to produce the data in just the form you want to start. Um, if that's not the case, if you've got to do a lot of data, it might be easy to write a VBA script to transform the data, or it might be easier in some cases to do it by hand. It just depends on the data, and to be honest, it's not very fun. So here's how we want that data. So we have city, precipitation, and month all as columns. So instead of having row headers and column headers, we just have column headers. And then every value, here I give the 12 values for Madison, one for each month. And then I go on to LA, and obviously there's more data below that. But this is how you want the data. So I had to do some work to go from that table on the previous slide to this. But once I'm in this form, then we're good to go. All right, so in order to create the pivot table, you highlight the data, and then you go to create the insert tab, and then you can find the create pivot table usually over on the left. And these are the defaults. The data's already here. It'll convert it into a table if it's not already that way. I always have them on a new worksheet. I don't want them stuffed into an existing worksheet, but that's just me. You can do it uh, in a worksheet with other stuff if you want. You can use external data rather than the data in the worksheet. I always have it just in the workbook itself, but that's up to you. So in general, I'm just taking the defaults on this. And this is what you get. So this is a pivot table. Um, you may have to do a little work to get that set up, but I'll show you that in a minute. So you choose the headings you want. You don't have to use all of them if you don't want to. And you decide what's in columns and what's in rows, and you use filters. I'll show you that in a minute. And the default here is that it sums things up, the precipitation value. So you see the months here, the cities here, and so for example, for LA, this is Phoenix. So for LA in January, the average precipitation is 3.98 inches, which is kind of surprising how high that is. I grew up there. I didn't know it rained that much. In fact, in February, you get more rain in LA than Seattle, which is kind of weird. Anyway, so this gives you totals by month for all the cities added up. This gives you annual totals, summed up for all the months by city, and then this is the total for the seven cities, added up over the year. All right, so that's just what came out of the creation process. If you want cities here and rows here, you can just exchange these two, and you can just drag them around to change that. And then I'll show you one other thing. I added data for the state. So I went back to the original data here, and I added a column for the state. And so for Madison, I put Wisconsin. For LA, I put California. And the thought here was, okay, if you have 7 cities, it's easy to summarize all of them in one table. But what if you had 500 cities? Then you might want to filter that by state and just look at California cities or Wisconsin cities or whatever. And so in that case, you add that column of data to the table. Then you'll have the state showing up in this field. And if you drag that down to a filter, then it allows you to filter on the state. And you see up here then this filter, and you can make a choice by clicking here in this arrow. And you could grab, for example, California, and then this would be limited to just the California cities, in this case LA. But again, if you had more cities, it would summarize that way. So that's another powerful thing here, is that you can do these filters. All right, so let me switch over and just walk you through how this works. Okay, so now I want to just walk you through how this works. So here's our data. The state data is here now. I'm going to take all of this. I'm going to highlight all 4 columns. I'm going to go to Insert, Tables, Pivot Table. I'm going to take the default, so it'll produce a new pivot table on a new worksheet. So here's what we get. We go here to the fields, and we choose the fields we want to use. I'm not going to use the filters for now, the state filters. Notice how it defaults to have everything in rows, and this is kind of fishy looking. We need some things. I know in the values I want to sum up precipitation values, so I'll put that there. Let's go with cities in columns, months in rows, but you could flip that if you want. It's defaulting to counting the precipitation events. That's kind of boring. So we want sums. So I'm going to drag this up. I'm going to make a choice here. I'm going to select value field settings here, and I'm going to switch to sums. Okay, so now you see that wants to sum things up. And so we get what we had before. We get these summations. I'm going to drag this out a little bit. All right. For some reason, I got a blank row. I don't know why that is. If you want to get rid of that, you can just click on the column labels, unselect the blank. We get that back. So it's totaling things up just like we had before. A couple things to note. You can, as I just showed you, select or deselect cities and choose which ones to show. So now we've just got a few of these, or I can go back to select all to get them all back. You can sort them alphabetically. Um, there's other sort options. So you can play with those headings there as much as you want. And similar with the rows, you can only show some months. I got a blank there also. So you can sort the columns, you can sort the rows, that sort of thing. All right. Now let's look at this filter option. So let's go back here and say I want the state. And I'm now going to drag this state down as a filter. Okay, so now that comes up here, the filter. And if I want just California cities, I can do that and select just the California cities. Again, that would make more sense if things were, if there were more cities and then California had a dozen cities or something like that. And I can go back and select all of these. If you want to be able to select multiple ones, right now by default it gets 1 month, one state at a time. If you do this select multiple items, now I can select multiple states and I get those summaries as well. All right. I think that's pretty much what I wanted to show you. So good luck with these pivot tables. There's a lot more that they can do. This is just the basics, but if you can do this, then it really will help you out. So good luck with that.